Afrique Média. Le monde, c'est nous.
I very appreciate all what you are talking about it. Good day and good day to all the viewers of Afrique Media. Thank you, Afrique Media. Thank you for what you are doing.
The future seems bleak for Sudan, that has been trapped lately in a series of unrest and civil disobedience ever since the military took over power in a coup late last month. Activists calling for the military not to get involved in politics have announced a schedule of protests leading up to mass rallies on November 13 under the slogan "No negotiation, no partnership, no compromise." At least 14 demonstrators have been killed and 300 wounded in a military crackdown, according to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors. A claim General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has denied. Sudan's protest movement has rejected international-backed initiatives to return to a power-sharing arrangement with the military following last month's coup orchestrated by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The army general seized power on October 25, dissolving the transitional administration and arresting dozens of government officials and politicians, a move that halted a power-sharing arrangement between the military and civilians that had been agreed upon after Bashir's ouster in 2019. The transition was meant to lead to democratic elections by late 2023. General al-Burhan has now indicated he will not take part in any government that comes after a transitional period, noting that the military is committed to handing over power to a civilian government of national competency and preserve the transition from any interference that can hinder it. What fate lies ahead for Sudan? This is Views on the Continent. Stay with us.
I very appreciate all what you are talking about it. Good day and good day to all the viewers of Afrique Media. Thank you, Afrique Media. Thank you for what you are doing. I very appreciate all what you are talking about it. Good day and good day to all the viewers of Afrique Media. Thank you, Afrique Media. Thank you for what you are doing.
It is always a pleasure to know you're watching Africa Media. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us on this other edition of Views on the Continent, where we take a look at what is happening on the continent and how we can seek possible solutions to these problems that the continent is facing at this point in time. And our focus this day is on Sudan, where there has been some sort of unrest after General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led a coup on October 25. He put aside some members of the transitional government that was put in place after President Omar al-Bashir was removed from power in 2019. And now protests have been going on in the country, calling for the country to return to a civilian-led administration. And General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, he's also saying that he's not going to get involved after this transitional period is over. What a future lies ahead for Sudan with such situations springing up every now and then? What lies ahead for the people of Sudan? What does the future hold for these Sudanese people? That's what we are looking at on the program this day. What is the way forward? What can be done so that there can be some sort of agreement between the civilians and the military? And military, so far, there are reports that at least 14 people have been killed in this protest that sparked up immediately. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan took over, who led a coup on October 25 this year, just a few months to when the transitional period would have been over for the government in place, the government that was put in place after President Omar al-Bashir was removed from power. So that is what we shall be looking at on the program this day. Like those of you who have been watching us all this while, this is an interactive program, and if you're just joining us for the very first time, it is an interactive program, of course, where you can always call and have your say, and this shall be done in the minutes that follow. Numbers we put on the screen so that you can have your say as to what the way forward in Sudan could be, given the current situation in the country. And of course, we shall also be having someone in the studio with us to take a look at this very interesting topic this day, and that will be in the person of Andrin Atem Ebako. He shall be joining us in the minutes ahead. And before we start entertaining your calls and taking a deeper look as to what is happening in Sudan, let us first of all listen to this report done for us by Sharon Techu as to the latest developments in Sudan. Take a listen.
Sudan's army and politicians seem to have edged closer to a new power-sharing deal as international efforts intensify to reverse October's coup. Negotiations between coup leaders Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, former rebel groups and removed Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok continued on Tuesday, November 2nd in the capital Khartoum. Hamdok said earlier on November 1st that the reinstatement of his government, dissolved in the military coup, will pave the way for a solution in the country as international mediation progressed to end the political crisis. He made statements while speaking during a meeting at his home, where he is under effective house arrest with the ambassadors of the United States, Britain and Norway, the ministry which remains loyal to the Prime Minister. The ousted Prime Minister further insisted on the legitimacy of his government and transitional institutions as he demanded that the situation in Sudan returns to what it was before the coup, refusing the negotiations with the military rulers. The U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, said after his arrival in the country on Tuesday that the army knows support from Sudan's economic development and debt relief, as well as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund financing, determined to restoring the democratic path in Sudan. The Coalition of the Forces for Freedom and Change on Wednesday, November 10th, reiterated its refusal to negotiate with the coup leaders in Sudan and renewed calls for the restoration of the transitional government and its Prime Minister Hamdok. Following a military coup on October 25th, African and Arab delegations arrived in Khartoum and urged coup leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan to restore the international diplomats in Khartoum and special representatives of the Secretary General of the United Nations sought to convince General Burhan to reverse this step in vain. October 25's coup was swift, with the US and World Bank cutting aid to pressure the military into releasing Hamdok and his detained colleagues. The UN Security Council urged the military on October 28th to relinquish power and restore civilian-led transitional government. Activists still insist on the military not to interfere in political matters and have announced a schedule of protests leading up to mass rallies on November 13th under the slogan "No negotiation, no partnership, no compromise." Burhan had since August 2019 chaired the council, working alongside Hamdok's government under a power-sharing deal that outlined the post-Bashir transition. The arrangements came under strain, however, as splits deepened between the civilian and the military. Mediation efforts in Sudan and abroad have meanwhile been underway to find a possible solution for the country. Although there has been progress, key differences are set to remain and an outcome is not guaranteed. The contours of a package might become visible in the coming days.
Thank you very much, Sharon Techu, for that detailed report as to what is currently happening in Sudan. And if you're just joining us, this is Views on the Continent, and our focus this day is on Sudan, where we are asking the question as to what future lies ahead for the East African country, which has seen a crackdown on dissent in the past days, so ever since General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan took over power in a military coup on October 25. What future lies ahead for the Sudanese people? Now, protests have been ongoing in the country, and these protests are meant to continue, and are going to lead up to mass rallies on November 13, like we just heard in the report. And there is a slogan for that: no negotiation, no compromise. So the Sudanese people are calling on the military to hand back power to the civilian, and that the military has no place in politics. It has nothing to do with how the country is being run. What is your take on this? What needs to be done in Sudan for the country to go back to what it used to be? And now the question one may be asking is why this military coup by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan just a few months to when the transition in the country after the ouster of Omar al-Bashir was supposed to come to an end, and the country holds election to now take the democratic nature of the country forward. So that question pops up: why did Burhan carry out this act? What seems not to be moving in the right direction in Sudan? And it is worth also noting that the country is still struggling to recover, because we know the protests that led to the ouster of Omar al-Bashir were more focused on the economy. We heard of a rise in prices of bread and other basic commodities. Now the country finds itself in this in such a state once again. What then needs to be done so much so that Sudan can take back the course of democracy, and the military does not interfere in the matters of politics? And if we listened earlier on in the report, we will find out that Abdallah Hamdok, that's the Prime Minister who led the transitional government, is calling that he and his administration be reinstated if things have to move in the right direction. And we know this latest move by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has put international condemnation, and we have the World Bank and the United States that have already cut aid to Sudan following this action, or this act by the army chief, the army general. What then needs to be done so that Sudan can go back to its normal course? We know these protesters are calling for they are actually refusing any form of negotiation with the military, and they are actually bent that the country must go back to a civilian rule. This is an interactive program, and for those of you who are not able to watch us, you can watch us live on Facebook. We are streaming live on Facebook. Go to our Facebook page, you will find the program, and you can watch us and tell us what you think about today's topic. Our numbers are on the screen. You can always call us and tell us what you think about the day's topic, what lies ahead for Sudan. And General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan he has equally mentioned that he is not going to take part in anything that concerns the government immediately the transitional period is over. What guarantees that General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is not going to interfere in the matters of the government after the transitional period is over? Those are some of the questions we are asking this day on the program. What can be done for Sudan to go back to what it used to be for the country to take democracy forward and not have the military interfering in matters of the government? So you can always call us. Our lines are open. You can always call us and tell us what you think. Now, in the minutes ahead, Mr. Andrin Atemebako will be joining us in the studio to take a look at this great topic and chip in his own little idea as to how things can be made easier for the Sudanese people who are actually facing a very tough time when it comes to the economy of the country. So you can always call us and tell us what you think that can happen to take Sudan forward, or any other issue that is affecting the continent at this point in time. So that is a topic for the day. It is an interactive program where you can call and have your say what future lies ahead for Sudan, given that the military continues to crack down on protesters. Now, we should also note that General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has said the military is not responsible for these deaths that have occurred in the course of this protest, and he says the military is there to protect the people and not to harm them. What do you think about this? Whereas there are reports that these protesters were actually killed as a result of military crackdown. What needs to be done now? What are international partners doing to bring Sudan back to what it used to be? Those are some of the questions we are trying to answer this day on the program. And for those of you just joining us, this is Views on the Continent, and we are looking at Sudan. What is the fate of this Horn of Africa country with the current situation in the country, where General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led a coup on October 25, just a few months to when the transitional government would have concluded its mandate after an agreement was signed in 2019 when President Omar al-Bashir was outed, that a council led by both the military and civilian. Normally in that agreement, the military was supposed to lead the country for 21 months, while the civilian leads the country for 18 months. Now, it was just a few months to this transitional period coming to an end, but then General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan just had to break the silence and make things more complicated for the Sudanese people. And the question is, why did the Army General carry out this act? Is it something that is going to benefit the Sudanese people, or how is it going to take the country forward? Those are some of the questions we are struggling to answer this day. And as we wait on your calls, let us go back to the report done for us by Sharon Techu, for those of you who are just joining us, so that you can actually catch up on what we are talking about. Take a listen to what Sharon Techu put together for us.
Sudan's army and politicians seem to have edged closer to a new power-sharing deal as international efforts intensify to reverse October's coup. Negotiations between coup leaders Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, former rebel groups, and removed Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok continued on Tuesday, November 2nd, in the capital, Khartoum. Hamdok said earlier on November 1st that the reinstatement of his government, dissolved in the military coup, will pave the way for a solution in the country as international mediation progressed to end the political crisis. He made statements while speaking during a meeting at his home, where he is under effective house arrest with the ambassadors of the United States, Britain and Norway, the ministry which remains loyal to the Prime Minister. The ousted Prime Minister further insisted on the legitimacy of his government and transitional institutions, as he demanded that the situation in Sudan returns to what it was before the coup, refusing the negotiations with the military rulers. The U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, said after his arrival in the country on Tuesday that the army knows support from Sudan's economic development and debt relief, as well as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund financing, determined to restoring the democratic path in Sudan. The Coalition of the Forces for Freedom and Change on Wednesday, November 10th, reiterated its refusal to negotiate with the coup leaders in Sudan and renewed calls for the restoration of the transitional government and its Prime Minister Hamdok. Following a military coup on October 25th, African and Arab delegations arrived in Khartoum and urged coup leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan to restore the international diplomats in Khartoum and special representatives of the Secretary General of the United Nations sought to convince General Burhan to reverse this step in vain. October 25's coup was swift, with the US and World Bank cutting aid to pressure the military into releasing Hamdok and his detained colleagues. The UN Security Council urged the military on October 28th to relinquish power and restore civilian-led transitional government. Activists still insist on the military not to interfere in political matters and have announced a schedule of protests leading up to mass rallies on November 13th under the slogan, "No negotiation, no partnership, no compromise." Burhan had since August 2019 chaired the council, working alongside Hamdok's government under a power-sharing deal that outlined the post-Bashir transition. The arrangements came under strain, however, as splits deepened between the civilian and the military. Mediation efforts in Sudan and abroad have meanwhile been underway to find a possible solution for the country. Although there has been progress, key differences are set to remain and an outcome is not guaranteed. The contours of a package might become visible in the coming days.
Thank you once again, Sharon Techu, for that detailed report as to the latest developments in Sudan. Joining us in the studio right away is Mr. Adrin Atem Ibako. He is a Pan-Africanist. Hello, sir, and thanks for joining us on the program this day.
Thank you very much, and all the viewers of Africa Media and to all Africans watching this program, a special greetings to everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you for honoring our invitation. Now, when we take a look at what is currently happening in Sudan, what is your general analysis as to what is actually taking place in the country at this point in time?
Well, it is quite a challenging situation and quite a difficult one for the whole nation as it is right now, that we see the agitations not only from the military, but we are seeing fractions. The military is against the military, the civilians against the civilians, the military against the civilians, and the civilians against the military. So it becomes very difficult for a consensus to be reached, because the only reason for this agitation and this pressure is only because of the inability to reach a consensus, and that's why the parties are all agitating. So, but for me, it is, Sudan has been under the rule of Omar Bashir for almost 27 years. And they have not had the legacy or the taste of democracy. And that is why the people feel that they want to have the freedom, they want to have the right to exercise their civil rights and to decide in an election who is going to be their president. You see, we have been on this road time and time without number, as a matter of fact, that the Sudanese are not quite aware of what is happening in other African countries, because we are very practically, we know what is in Africa. What happens in all of the African nations is similar to what is happening in Sudan. That is to say that you can use the analysis of Sudan and tell what is happening in Cameroon. You can use the analysis of Sudan and tell what is happening in Ethiopia. The stories are all the same, and if you want to look deeply to what is happening, you come to realize that the same people who are involved in all these countries that have civil conflicts are present in Sudan. So which tells you that the problem is not really a home-based problem, but it is a foreign problem, which some people or the Sudanese are trying to keep a system which they believe that through such system they can be able to get their liberty and their freedom and be able to build their nation. And you see, all of this is happening in Africa, where we have 29 military bases of the Americans in Africa, in about 19 countries. In Africa, 29 military bases. In France, French bases are 15 in all its colonies. Then you have the Africommand in Africa. You have the armies of the AU. You have the UN forces in Africa. The question is, why do we have all of this insecurity? So that comes back to, for us to understand that when you see events like this happening in Sudan, we come to understand that it's still the same possession, where you are being possessed by a foreign force, which affects the functionality of the state, the administrator, and the mentality of the people. Because if they are talking of a transitional government leading back to an election to hand back power in the hands of the civilians, we have never seen any government in Africa that is a civilian government. As a matter of fact, we have never seen any. Civilian government simply means that it is a government like a government of Sankara, a government of Magufuli, a government of Paul Kagame, for example, a government of Gaddafi. But such governments, they don't want to see them in Africa. Look at what is happening in Ethiopia. Abiy Ahmed is there for the people. The West is against a man who is for his people. So this is a challenge where when we talk about civilian governments are never democratically elected in Africa. We have never seen any president or prime minister that has done well, that was democratically elected by the people. None. 99% of them don't do well. Out of a miracle, the 1% that comes out, they seek to eliminate them. We have seen all of that in Africa. So the story in Africa is not strange to us when we see things like this happening. What is the British doing in Sudan? What are the Americans doing? Those are the questions you need to ask. They are there to protect their interests. We have over 40 million African Americans living in America that they are not treated well. Charity begins at home. If you cannot treat the blacks, the Africans that are in America, is it the Africans in Sudan you want to treat them well? It's not applicable. All these military bases are here to make sure that when their interest is being jeopardized, they push in their armies either to create insecurity, instability, and then destabilize a government which is standing for its people. That's what happened in Ethiopia. 50,000 troops joined the Tigrayan forces. From where? They came from Sudan, this same Sudan. Because the American base is somewhere around that area, and then they pushed 50,000 armed young Africans to join the Tigrayan forces rebels to fight against the central government. So we know what they are doing in Africa. They are not here for the Africans. The AU is quiet. At this point, every African at this point now should admit that we don't have an African Union in Africa, because the African Union seems to have traveled, is absent, because there's a war, a conflict at the doorstep of the capital of AU, and AU is absent. We do have not, as a matter of fact, it's like sometimes you ask, where have AU gone to? We don't hear anything about them. They don't comment. Why? Because they are not there to protect the African interest. They are there to protect the interest of the imperialists. And just because the West is against the regime of Abiy Ahmed, that's why the AU sits quiet. We are not getting any other, how will I put it, organization which seem to be seeking for a cooperation, a better development, a peaceful Africa, a society without conflict, without guns and all of that. We are not getting any.
All right, now before we try to see how Sudan can come out of the situation, let us first of all try to understand why. What, in your opinion, what do you think actually pushed General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan to lead a coup on October 25 to take power, when the transitional period for the government in place was just like a step away from being over, so that the country could now lead democratic elections for a new leader to come in place?
The individual the general who has just ousted the transitional government, I'm sure he knows what is happening very well in Sudan. For all the years Omar Bashir has been in power, that country has been under sanctions for 3 decades. That was the same Sudan which was listed among the 7 nations when Bush got into power, that they were going to break down this nation, including Libya, and which they did. That same Sudan in 1982, Osama bin Laden visited that country, and from henceforth was blacklisted as one of those nations that sponsored terrorists, which was not true. But these are all the media propaganda built by CNN, BBC, and then Al Jazeera also coming behind to give the world the impression that Sudan, those are the people there. They don't even have what to eat. So is it the people who are going to sponsor terrorists, for the terrorists to go and attack who? Those are the questions people did not ask themselves. So this is, in my opinion, the general understands that there is no transitional government that is going to lead to civilian rule in Sudan, because when all those sanctions, when the American gave the Sudanese the condition of arresting Omar Bashir and indicting him at the level of the ICC with the condition that they were going to uplift all the sanctions that Sudan was going through, and they did. And we saw also with all their allies, Paris Club, World Bank, IMF, and all European, credit facilities, counsel the debts which was owed in Sudan. And the country began its footing with a huge sum of loan which they took from the IMF. And I saw how the people went out on the street and began agitating for because of the alliance with the World Bank and all of that, the loan that the country was getting. The people were already agitating because they had lived under a condition for a very long period, and they did not want to begin a new phase of a country indebting themselves again where they are coming from. And so I want to believe that the general understands that the Americans had made a deal with the transitional government to protect an existing treaty and business arrangement, which was going to jeopardize the interest of the population. But the population does not understand that. And because of all the pressure, it's the same thing they did in Guinea-Conakry. It's the same thing they did in Mali. Placing pressure where you cannot even put a vision on the table for the people to see that this is the plan you have for the nation. Because the reason why the agitation is because of lack of inability to reach a consensus, because a proper vision has not been put to place. And even if it is put in place, there are people who are opposing and say this is not what we want. So the country is in a very difficult position, because you have those that are aligned with the West, you have those that are aligned with the former government, let me put it that way, and then you have those that are aligned with the military. So all of these things makes Sudan right now at a point where in the space of 2 years it's almost like they are going to have a three coups, because this one is already it's showing as if it's not going to succeed, because the people, you have fraction of the population that is against, and then you have fraction of the population that is for. How then do you merge these two people together? You can only do that if only you do not have external influences and pressure coming from the international community that gives you people the room to sit down and then decide collectively on what is going to be best for you. But because the West has an interest in Sudan, that makes it very challenging for you to rally the people under one banner. That is where the major challenge is. You see, once a house is divided against itself, it can never stand. And that is the fact that we have intruders or how will I call it, dictators coming from the West, or dictation coming from the West, does not give the people the room to come together. That's the simple truth. They are only there to create division. And as long as there's division, that simply means that the Americans are going to push until they get their way. But this is not what democracy as propagated was supposed to be. Let the people decide.
So are you saying to some extent General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan actually acted in the interest of the Sudanese people?
Yes, he did. That I would assure every African 100%. He did. Else, he will not, all this pressure you are getting from the West will not be. The West had already made an existing arrangement for their interest with that transitional government, and that is the simple truth. Now that is jeopardized, and that is why you realize that they are pressing hard to make sure that that government, which had already abided by their conditions, should be restored. Why do you force the people to restore back a government? That's why I don't understand. And more to even say, if another coup has taken place, then they should let the coup leader who have ousted the transitional government, let him decide on what is going to be best for the people, and let him be given the room to put down a plan in place, and then let the UN and the international community or the AU and all the African member states see the vision and see if it is for or against. Nobody seeks to know whether it's for or against. They are only insisting that the former transitional government should be restored. For whose benefit becomes the question. Because we have seen in other societies, we are talking of leading back into a transitional election that is going to bring power back into the hands of the civilian. Call out for elections and see how the people are going to go out. Do you know how they are going to go out? They are not going to go out in one group. They'll come from minority groups, which already gives an existing problem of division. Because if you get into power from a minority group, you are not going there to protect the interests of all the other opposition parties that contested with you in the period of election. You are going there to make sure your party stays in power and then keep the existing treaties of those that control your democracy. What we are talking here is a conflict which is going on the behalf of the UN. What are they fighting in Sudan? They are fighting to keep democracy, to put an election for the people to decide. All the conflicts in Africa, almost 99.9% of them, they are fighting a war on the behalf of the imperialists. If not France, it's America. If not America, it's Russia. If not Russia, it's China. It has to. All our civil conflicts go back to the colonialists. So this tells you that as long as you have abided by using their structures and system, they will intrude. But if you are going to build your own system, they can only come and take you out like they did with Sankara, they did with Gaddafi. I don't know if you understand me. But if it is this way, they will always influence those that they want to be in power, because the masses here, like I gave the statistics last time, we have over 41.1% of the population of the Sudanese are below 15 years of age. 25% is from 15 to 25 years of age, and then 15% is from 25 to 55 years of age, and then 3.3% is from 55 to 60 and above. So when you are talking of calling for an election leading back to a civilian rule, already 80% of the population are not even eligible to exercise their rights. So should he not be a strong man who knows what is good for his people, should decide on them? In every society we should be able to maintain order. This idea of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, everybody cannot speak at the same time. If you get into a plane, it's not everybody who is a pilot. There must be one person who is leading everybody, but democracy does not give you the room. Democracy says in a family, a child has equal right as a father. As the father is speaking, the child too is speaking. That is what freedom of speech means. So we cannot live in a society that has disorder. In every society, as our African culture, we believe in order in our society, knowing the position of each person. And if we cannot build societies like that in Africa, thinking that everybody should have the freedom of speech, you can never build a nation with everybody having the freedom of speech. That simply means everybody is a head. A nation with everybody being up there. No, there must be chain of order and responsibility.
Of course, if you're just joining us, this is Views on the Continent, and we are looking at Sudan, what future holds for this East African country, where there are reports of military crackdown on protesters who are actually protesting against military coup led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan on October 25, which put aside a transitional government that was arranged after Omar al-Bashir was ousted from power in 2019. And of course, it is an interactive program. Our numbers are on the screen. You can always call us and tell us what you think about today's topic. And we have indications of our first caller on the line. Hello, and thanks for joining us on the program. Is the caller there? Hello, sir, and thanks for joining us on the program. We seem not to get through to that caller at this moment. We shall be coming back to you. You can keep your calls coming in. Tell us what you think about today's topic or any other issue that is affecting the country. Now, turning back to you, Mr. Atame Bako. Now, the ousted Prime Minister or the government, the head of the government that was dissolved during this recent coup by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Is the caller there? Hello, sir. Thanks for joining us on the program. Can we get the caller? If the caller is there, can we have you on air?
Lawrence here. I'm viewers of Afrique Media. This is Shu Gerard calling from Yaoundé. Yes, Laurencia, we have been following the political situation in Sudan with key attention, and we begin to ask ourselves is where is Africa going? Would there be real democracy in Africa? You must remember and understand that since the dethronement of General of Omar al-Bashir from power in that country in Sudan, things have never been the same. Those who dethroned Omar al-Bashir were in that position, and after eyeing that position, they pretended as if they want to reconcile the nation, and they form a transitional council. Now, the military has been eyeing that position for a very long time, even when Omar al-Bashir was in power, even though most of them were so loyal to him. They first of all dethroned him, and he left the scene, and allowed a civilian, pretended as if they want to reconcile the nation, I've said, by creating a civilian and a military council in order to intend sow a discord within the council to say that they are not doing enough by appointing a civilian prime minister. So that was just what happened. After that, we have seen the result now. The result in that country is not moving because the same military want to rule the country. General Fatah al-Burhan want to rule the country, and his men, they want to rule the country. They don't want to hear from anybody. You remember what happened in Libya, where Muammar Gaddafi was dethroned, and up to today there is no peace in that country. Remember frequent coup d'etats in Africa, they were being seen, and when that demon of coup d'etat or is in that country, entered into a country, or the door of that country is open for that demon of coup d'etat, it will be very, very difficult for such a demon to leave that country, except the people come back themselves and play a vital role for the development of their country. So South Sudan, General Fatah al-Burhan, the only way he can do is to teleguide a different civilian administration and then sit behind and watch the scene. Meanwhile, we know that it's been teleguided by him. If not, we have been seeing them move on the street every day. Many have died. They cannot kill everybody. I know, remember that during the Arab Spring, Laurencia, many Arabs were killed in most of the countries where it happened, Tunisia, in Nigeria, in Egypt, and many were killed. But at the end of it all, their demands were achieved. They dethroned the existing government, and we can see what is happening today. Thank you.
Gerard, for your contribution. You can always call us our numbers on the screen and tell us what you think about today's topic. What future lies ahead for Sudan, given the current situation in the country, where there are reports of the military cracking down on protesters, and these protesters are saying that this rallies or this protests are going to continue, and are going to amass to rallies on November 13, and the slogan for that is no negotiation, no compromise. So what do you think about this current situation in the country, and what can be done for these different parties to come to a compromise, at least if not for the country to move forward, but at least for the Sudanese people, the common Sudanese man who is depending on their leaders for their day-to-day activity. Now, Mr. Atame Bako, before the the call came in, I was putting this question out to you. Now, if we listened to the report at the start of the program, we have Abdallah Hamdok, that's the Prime Minister of the transitional government that has already been put aside by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. He's saying that if things have to move in the right direction, this administration has to be reinstated. Do you really think if this administration is reinstated, it's going to solve Sudan's problems?
We always say peace is not the absence of war. It will quell down the agitation, but it will not solve the problem of the Sudanese, the common people. And those are the people we are very much concerned about, because, like I cited, the current general is 61 years of age. The one that, I think is 61 years of age. So what are we going to do that is going to meet the demands of the Sudanese and is going to reflect their own the embodiment of their own identity and develop their society so that they can be able to establish themselves in their own country, they can be able to live well in their own country, they can be, they can have hope in developing their society collectively with a government that cooperates and collaborates with the masses. And that is where the major challenge is. And in the looks of things, like I said, Sudan has never tested democracy that way like in other African countries. And that's why majority of them feel that through an election they can exercise their rights. You know, a population of about 43 million people, where, like I cited, over 70% is just below a certain age, and majority of those people don't even know what they want. That is the most the most tricky part about it. And when you live in a society, like I kept saying, that in societies where the people are ignorant, if you use an iron fist, it works well. In a society where the people are enlightened, you can't use an iron fist. What you do is that you build systems that protect the interests of everybody, and that's the way you lead in such society. So in Sudan right now, like I kept saying, that democracy easily works in society that have already developed. Everybody's interest is protected, and it makes election becomes like a friendly match. But in the case of Sudan, it's like a lottery, because you are talking of votes, elections. That means people are going to gamble the destiny of a nation. An underdeveloped country which has come from a very long history of sanctions and poverty. So I think it's an abuse of democracy if you are asking them to go back to the ballot box. We are not playing game of chance here. We know the problem of the people of Sudan. We need somebody who is going to meet their demands, period. Call the people and let them choose certain elders in their society, and let those elders recommend somebody who can meet the demands of the people. Is that not what America is doing? America has the electoral college. When the people have gone out to play their games, and then the electoral college sits down and decide who is going to be the president, and they appoint the president. When George Bush stole 450,000 votes in 2000, was he not still made the president? The electoral college decided that George Bush should be the president. The same thing in China. 2,980 individuals are consulted as deities of who is going to be the president in China. So they are appointed. It's just like a man who is married to his wife and has a sexual intercourse publicly. They should allow the people to coronate and to enthrone somebody in a secret place. And when they have decided that, they can now bring out that person for celebration. And that is our society. If you go back in how elders, chiefs, and all of that were being enthroned, it is a secrecy that is not made known to many people. They just decide and say, okay, this is the person the gods or the elders have decided to be the king or to be the chief in this area. And the people, and whoever is being elected like that or appointed comes from the will of the people. So he's taken an oath to defend the people. But here, how is it said the game of leadership is being built at the level of the UN? When we talk of democracy, we are talking of the UN. UN are structures that were there before the birth of Africa. When you talk about that Sudan is, let's say, 57 years or 60 years old, who gave birth to Sudan? 1945 was the image of the United Nations. Africa was not born. So why do you want a people to use a medication which does not meet the demands of their current times? We are not in 1945. We're in 2021. When you are prescribing medications for a certain people, you need to be able to do a test on their own system and see which one is going to work for them. Because not every medication works for everybody, and that's why tests are being carried out. Why are you imputing Africans to use democracy? That's why I don't really understand. This idea of putting pressure for the people to... We don't need civilians in Africa. We need armies, young armed men and women who are ready to build their nation. Civilians are people who have nothing to offer. We need people who have what to offer. So we don't need government that are going to have civilians in their civilians as their population. We need government who need armies, who need builders, who need visionaries, who need people who are willing to work for their nation. That's how people like Magufuli were able to build their nation. Sankara, they work with the people because they knew that if they were going to build their nation, they had to rely on the people. So we don't need civilians. So what the Americans and the West is doing in Africa, telling us to go back and have a fair and transparent elections. You call lottery transparent election. The man who set the game of the lottery is the only person who never loses in every election. And those are the people who control our democracy. So what I'm saying here is that we should understand that when Omar Bashir was in power for almost 27 years, how long has the United Nations been the 5 veto member? Since 1945. When a man keeps power, we even have hope that the man can fall sick and die. But when a nation keeps power, it means till Jesus will come. So which of these two are we going to prefer? Is it a man or is it a structure? They have structures in place which are stronger than individual. But they tell you how an individual has stayed long in power, but nobody complains how long the 5 veto member have been in power. As nations, the presidents die, the same comes to power and still behave the same like the ancestors in 1884. So we have structures in place that we need such structures not to be in Africa because they are older than Africa. They are older than the Africans. As a matter of fact, we are talking of structures that almost all the entire Africans were not even born at the time such structures were set in place. Not by their founding fathers, not by their forefathers, but by their colonialists. And then you are telling us to use them. That means that we are still growing. Are they trying to tell us that even if it were the case that they gave birth to us, so an African of 60 years today is still a child, let us be able to manage our own things. This is very important.
Okay, now General Abraham, he himself, he has said he will not take part in any government that comes in after a transitional period, and he notes that the military is committed to handing over power to a civilian government of national competency and preserve the transition from any interference that can hinder it. What can you say about the stance of Abraham? Like you mentioned earlier on that he had actually noted that the transitional government, there was some sort of foul play in the transitional government, reason why he carried out this coup, and he's talking of handing over power to a civilian government of national competency. Is there a message he's trying to put out?
I think the vision is clear. It is just the distractions that we're having left, right, up, down, that seem to put him off balance. He has already said he will not be part of it, but he wants to make sure that the transitional government should be the one that is going to seek for the national interest of the people. And that's why I told you that we understood when the first transitional government was set up in place, it was to protect an existing treaty business arrangement with the Americans and the Europeans. That's the simple truth. And that's why the IMF was funding the money. That's why the World Bank was funding the money. When Abiy Ahmed requested for loan for the electricity dam in Ethiopia, the IMF refused funding that project. But the World Bank is funding a transitional government. A bank supports a transitional government. It means that that transitional government is keeping an interest for that bank. It's simple as it is. If a nation requests for something that is going to be as development in the entire Africa, if they are seeking for development, they should have funded the project. But they refused funding the electricity dam in Ethiopia. How do you add those things up? We are not in space. We are in Africa. We want monitor everything that happens in all African countries. If the Sudanese are wise, they should send out all those multinationals away. That is the first thing they should do in their country. The same like you saw what the ECHO and the Assimi Goïta did. He flushed out the AU so that the people can be able to think. You cannot be thinking for your people and then you have somebody that is making noise in your ear like a mosquito. They should go away and allow the people to have some how like call it a breeze of serenity to decide what they want to do for their nation. Who goes to America when they are talking about their own election? When Trump was crying for foul play, did Africa complain? We sat quiet. We only saw it on TV. But why is it that we are even talking of a transitional government to lead to an election when the election has not even yet arrived? The West has already flown down 1,000 kilometers away to Africa. What are they doing here? like I was trying to say about all these their military bases, should they not have been the one conducting peace, for example, in Sudan? In Ethiopia, we've seen the death toll of recent. So at the end of the day, what are they doing in Africa? We know what their foreign policy says. Their foreign policy says is to exploit the most out of Africa despite the consequences. That is as simple as it is. So they are not here for any African. They don't love any African. And that is the simple truth. You cannot be in a place. We have Africans in Europe. We have Africans in America. And we know how they are being treated there. So you cannot leave the ones that are in your home and then you claim to have loved the ones that are not at home. Love the ones first in your house, and then we'll know that you love us. This is the simple truth.
Okay, now we are almost at the end of the program, and just to conclude, now we learned that when this coup took place, the United States as well as the World Bank cut aid to Sudan, and I just wish to find out from you, do you think this action from the World Bank and the United States is going to make General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan change his stance? And to actually wrap up, what can the Sudanese people do to take their country forward, or to put this current situation in place under control?
Sudan, what should be done here is very simple. And this is a prescription I'm offering to all African democratically elected presidents. When you get to power, begin to seek alliance with the Africans in the diaspora, without which no African nation will survive in Africa. And that's why you see Abiy Ahmed, as young and talented as he is, he's having some breakthrough. Because he managed to call out for help on the people. And you have seen now the power of the people is greater than that of the media and the military. We have rallied our people worldwide on Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is the talk of town. Everywhere in America, in Europe, everybody is talking about Ethiopia. And this is what we want. We want presidents who know how to build alliance, so that when there's trouble here, Africans will get up there and will not give them peace in their own homes. Then they will remove their hands off Africa. And that is why I said that the only breed of Africans who can send out the multinationals away out of Africa are the Africans in the diaspora. As a matter of fact, if you even link the African with the African Jamaicans, I'm sure that in less than 2-3 months, all those military bases will leave Africa. I'm telling you the simple truth. Because they know the imperialists like A to Z. And they can cause agitations in Europe, in America, concerning what is happening in Africa. So you cannot get into power and then you seem to want to run the country as a private state-owned company. You dissolve and you drown. It's like a man who takes his father's property and wants to take it all for himself without considering the fact that the father has other children. African leaders need to start looking outside. We are the most populated race in over mankind. We have over 3 billion of Africans out there. Get them align with you. You need help for aid, loans, whatever. They will give it to you. You don't need the World Bank. We are talking of $143 million of aid that went to Ethiopia. What is that money compared to what the Americans are looting out of Ethiopia? That's an insult to Africans. We can do it ourselves. Simple.
Thank you so much, Mr. Atem Ibako. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation this day on the program. Thank you so much, televiewers. Thank you all for taking our time to be with us on the program. We are here to seek African solutions to African problems, and we are trying to look at what the future lies ahead for Sudan, what the Sudanese people can do to bring their country back to what it used to be. We want to thank all who took out time to participate on the program, and all our technicians who touched the buttons to make the program a successful one. Another edition of the program comes up tomorrow at the same time, 14 hours GMT, to take a look at another issue that is affecting the continent at this time. Until then, it is bye-bye from us.
I very appreciate all what you are talking about.